Welcome back to the Agentic Insider. I'm your host, Philip Swan. In this show, we explore cutting-edge ideas and trends in AI and data, as well as hear from other industry thought leaders in the AI space. This podcast is brought to you by Iridius AI, committed to safe and responsible AI innovation. Let's dig in. Welcome back to this edition of the Agentic Insider. Today, I'm super excited because we get to have an AI reality check of our very own. I'm thrilled, absolutely thrilled to have one of our partners in the business, person I call brother, quite literally, and who I'm super close to. I cannot think of anything but great things to say about Spencer Bentley. Spencer not only is our technical fellow, he is also the head of OpenAI's developer forum, which has over 1 million developers. So he gets a unique perspective as to what's going on in the industry, and it's very broad. And so, Spencer, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Philip.
Yeah, great to have you here. So let's start out with a question. So Spencer, what sort of trends are you seeing in the forum so far?
Majority of the trends at the minute are around the OpenAI's version of a slightly automated version of the API, and they call that the Assistance API. And because it takes a bunch of the load off developers, so it handles things like RAG, it handles things like search. When that was first offered, a lot of developers who perhaps looked at RAG and thought, this is really complicated. This is not an easy thing to do. Oh, look, OpenAI have just done it. I can upload my files, make a call to the Assistance API, and it just works. One of the downsides of this is that all of the back end is handled not by you. So you have no idea how many tokens are being used for the RAG. You don't know the RAGing chunking algorithm. So we get a lot of questions that are asking, what's the best way to do this? And most of that is us saying to them, do it yourself. Don't use that API. Use the raw APIs and build your own RAG solution. So the trend I'm seeing at the minute is a move to what OpenAI now calling, well, I should set the history to this. There used to be something called the Completions API, which was used from ChatGPT 2 onwards. Recently, that was changed to the Responses API, which now handles RAG and all of the things the Assistance API did, but in a more configurable way.
So what did the Completions API do? Why was it useful? And then how has that been replaced?
It was a way, not necessarily the best way, but it was a way of sending information to the model and then getting information back from the model.
Perfect. That makes sense. Okay. And so it's been replaced now?
No. I think the writing's on the wall for the old API, but because of the legacy applications that have been built, it's something that can't be done overnight. So there will be a gentle persuasion campaign to move people onto Responses. It is much simpler. You can simply put a line of text, send it to the API, and you get the answer. You don't need to do the somewhat complex formal JSON structuring that happens at the minute.
So for some of the audience that's not as technical as some of us are, can you explain what the value of a RAG, why you need a RAG, have a RAG system available and stuff like that?
There are two primary ways of augmenting an AI's behavior. One of those is fine tuning, and the other one is RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. People often get this wrong. So the best way to describe this that I've come up with so far is, for fine tuning, as it stands today, there will be a new version coming out over the next few months. But as it stands today, fine tuning, if you were to fine tune an AI on all of the works of Shakespeare, it would know almost nothing about any of the details in any of the books. It would know nothing about the stories, nothing about the characters. But if you asked it to write a new book, it would write in the style of Shakespeare. And people often get that confused, and they fine tune a model on their company data set and then go, why does it doesn't understand my company. It doesn't know any of the details. Correct. But it will now write as if it was your company writing. That's where RAG comes in. You can use your company data set and you can break it up into manageable little chunks, usually, and not all the time, but the most common one is at the paragraph level. So if you look at your company data lake, and most of it is documents, most of it is paragraphs. You break your data into paragraphs, you encode each paragraph into a special type of database called a vector database, and then you can ask questions of that database and find the most similar chunks of text. You can pull back the top 10, the top 20, the top 100 chunks of text and include those as context for any questions you're asking. So
that's great. So this is all predicated that your data is good, right?
It's always been in all of science throughout history is garbage in, garbage out. If you have bad data, you will get bad results.
And so you were talking about trends in the forum. So coming back to that, and you were saying that obviously the APIs have changed, but you're now seeing a way that RAG could be done differently. But at the moment, it seems like the API isn't the best way of doing it yet. And it would be better to wait for a future version to use it, from what I was understanding.
So there are two schools of thought. One is that RAG may be coming to an end, because if you can have a model, as Google have recently released, which has got 10 million tokens worth of context, the first sort of thing that comes to mind is, oh, well, then I don't need to use RAG. I can just put all my data into the prompt and get a more accurate result.
So 10 million tokens worth of context. Give us an example of how big that would be.
If you're talking about normal English story text or English literature text, the formula, the rule of thumb is roughly 0.75 or 3/4 of a word per token. So if you've got 100,000 tokens, 75,000 English literary story words. Doesn't cover things like scientific notation, mathematical notation, programming languages. Their symbology turns that into a much lower number. It may be as low as 0.2 for those kinds of things. But for just standard language, 0.75 is the rule of thumb.
And you were saying that there's a Google model, out there now with 10 million tokens. Yep. Context is its knowledge about the documents.
So the way that Google currently define that is needle in a haystack. Now that's not what most people are not looking for, a hidden sentence within 10 million tokens or 7.5 million words. That's not something that's done very often, but it's a test to see, can the model recall accurately something buried in there? What they tend to do is take the Harry Potter novels and they embed a password into one of the paragraphs in a Harry Potter novel and then say to the AI, what's the password in all of the books? And if it retrieves that information, then it passes. But what most people want to do is they want to ask questions of that large data set. What was the motivation of Snape in the book? And that is a different question to, can you find a needle in a haystack? And it seems at the minute that the performance is not quite what was advertised, but it's heading in that direction. So we're heading to an increasing, and it's going to end up being effectively limitless.
So that's important. So just before we jump on to another question, so we are saying is that for the moment, as the context, the amount of data that it can automatically, understand becomes bigger and bigger. You don't need a RAG-based approach to import all of that, organizational documentation as The model can take it in because the context size is so large in order to be able to understand the organization's context.
Right. That's one interpretation of it. The other one is that RAG is still very, very valid because it enables you to take not just 10 million, but 10 billion, 10 trillion tokens worth of information and only use 1,000 or 10,000 of that data set. And so it means that a RAG solution is cheaper, significantly so.
As you see things moving, Spencer, you and I are, I count myself as blessed. I get to talk to you literally every single day. So I get to stay ahead. But for other people who are not don't have the exposure that we're blessed to have, let's talk a little bit about the trends that we've been seeing, because you and I regularly talk, and Alistair, the three of us, we talk, just because you can does not mean that you should, right? So it starts bringing in the whole concept of safe and responsible AI, and fairness, accessibility, transparency, explainability have to be core into what people are doing, especially when you're talking at the enterprise grade level. You should be talking about this at the consumer level too, as well, because in my opinion, my personal opinion, it's fraught with danger. And it's a big reason why I'm one of the co-founders here, because I believe that from day one. What trends, and I know this is a huge crystal ball, right? We know that our personal lives at work at Iridius literally change on a daily basis based on new information that we get. What trends are you seeing that we can help people, wrap their heads around, whether it's in a 3-month window, a 6-month window, an 18-month window? Because I think 18-month window is science fiction at this point, right? And personally, right, I think about, what's going to be launched tomorrow, what's going to be launched next week, right? And can we take advantage of it? And you've seen me write about this before. As the head of product at Iridius, we're literally building products on quicksand because our foundations change literally all the time, and it's just been an amazing experience. So what are you seeing from a trends perspective that would be useful to our audience?
So the major thing for 2025 is agents. This is AI that are given the ability to act in the real world. That ability is going to be a motivating factor for companies, I think, because you can then, rather than just passively interacting with ChatGPT, amazing as that is, if you can then say to the AI, okay, thanks for that really useful information. Now, can you go and email everybody that information? Or can you now go and find the right person in the right department and let them know that I need to have a meeting about this? And so you want your AI to be connected to your calendar, to your document database, to HR, to accounts, to sales. That's where the real power and trend is moving. And all of the big foundation model builders are now changing the way they train models to make that it's agentic first.
Shivers are going up and down my spine as I hear you talking about this, about how there's such a significant paradigm shift, right, that's ongoing. How would you define an agent? What is it? Everybody talks about agent this and agent that, and I know from personal experience what I'm seeing coming from companies that are agentic systems are not what we think of as agentic systems. They're still thinking an old paradigm model. How would you define an agent, Spencer?
I think people have lost the plot a little bit with AI and agents, and they're missing the point. In my opinion, an agent is an intelligence that can effect change, that can change either the real world or some virtual world. And it's an intelligence. It doesn't matter if that's artificial or real. We are all agents. We have agency. We are able to affect things in the real world. And I think at a simple level, we've now got a cheap, fast, intelligence source that doesn't need sleep, is very cheap relative to its performance. And people are not realizing that's what we can now leverage that.
So an agent could be a person, an agent could be an existing system, an agent that was already in the enterprise, an agent could be solving a problem that was until now unsolvable because of the old paradigm model, right?
Right. I think the main point I would like to get across is that it shouldn't matter what the agent is behind the interface that you connect to it. The way we're doing things, we're saying, okay, just have an initial text interface that you can send, or voice or image, any of the standard modalities. You can send it a picture or a string of text or a sample of sound. And the response should be reciprocal. You should get back what you sent in. Or if the request says, here's a picture, I would like the response in text, the system should be smart enough to respond to you in your requested format.
So an agent's like a virtual employee, in other words, right?
Correct.
Right. And when you think in terms of virtual employees, you've now suddenly got a code of conduct that you expect your human employees to do that, in my opinion, agents should also be adhering to as well.
Because it is simply intelligence that you have access to. You want the intelligence to do something of value for you.
This is like giving an ultra smart toddler precise instructions with a goal versus a task, in my opinion, right? So this is goal, what you're describing is goal oriented versus task oriented. Would you agree with that, Spencer?
Yes. One thing I would add is what we're working on is making it so that you don't have to give exact instructions. You can give the kinds of instructions you would give a skilled employee, because they're able to take the context in which you're asking that question and use that to narrow down the possible range of solutions. Can you email that file to that person? Makes sense if you've just been speaking to somebody as a joint venture and they know what file you're talking about. If that's not the case, you need to specify file name, person. But the AI should be smart enough that if it's got that context, we should be able to, you don't need to specify everything. And I think that's one of the really powerful things is that humans we assume a lot of context.
Right. And it's that context that reduces or eliminates hallucination. Where AI and hallucination is where AI is representing something as true and it's not, right? So there are lots of examples of that, and we don't need to get into this. I think people are familiar with that. But this is really important because, in my opinion, and Alistair, I'm going to throw this at you. I mean, what could possibly go wrong with that if you don't,
Exactly. I mean, I think as Spencer would say too, as if you have an agent that's operating inside the Disney Corporation or it's operating inside GM, that's a very different agent. Okay, it needs the agent can be tasked to do very similar things, but ultimately the way it communicates with colleagues, the code of conduct is different. The set of guidelines for it across the organization, all of those are fundamentally different because they're nuanced according to the organization that you're in. And I think it's very important for that agent to understand, as you were saying, a code of conduct and the internal guidelines, and that, as we were talking earlier with Spencer, the organizational context. It needs to know that, as well as be imbued with all of the entitlements, as we would call them, around the ethics, okay, and where to involve a human in the loop, okay, or a human over the loop, and so on. Spencer, do you agree?
Absolutely. All companies contain a lot of context, and what's missing at the minute, what ChatGPT doesn't have, is all of that context. It doesn't know you just got off the phone with someone. It doesn't know that you just finished an email with someone. A system that's intelligent, that has access to that, will be a lot more powerful.
And so we talked about, agents. This is the year of the agent. Okay, that's the where things are at the moment. So what excites you most about where AI is heading in the next 12 to 18 months or so?
I won't do the 18-month one because I have
Sure.
no idea. I think anyone that predicts confidently out more than 3 months is guessing. If you might be able to do accurately a month, maybe 2, 3 months is pushing it. 6 months is you're really out there, and 18 months, not a clue. Where I see things going at the minute is context size is going to increase. That's really important. And agentic behavior and the ability for agents to cooperate effectively will increase. That's where the effort is being put. The other thing that's happening is that the foundation model builders are attempting to make their models into programmers. So I think a lot of standard business applications are being ignored because all the foundation model builders want to build models that can code. Once they can code, then other things will happen. So I think we're going to see a big improvement in coding ability, and not necessarily in things like document generation. That has always been a little bit weak, in my opinion. I think that if you ask an AI to generate a document, it looks like an AI has generated that document.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, so one of the things that we see regularly, as you know, Spencer, is that a lot of AI projects are stuck in R&D, right? They're not getting into production. So how do you recommend teams experiment with AI that's, without slowing down their innovation?
I think the first one they've got to ask themselves is, do we need AI for this project? Or are we bolting AI on because that's what we think we should do? It needs a very cold, calculated overview done on the project. Do we really need AI for this? Most of the time, the answer is no. Most business processes can be done with traditional code and traditional procedures. But if you identify, yes, this is a really great use case for AI, narrow the focus down. Be really specific on one key achievement you want to get from the end.
Give us an example.
Okay, so if you want to build a system that talks to your customers and gives them the information on prices, but you start off and go, I want a customer support agent. And you say it should know every single product, it should know all of the background, it should be able to deal with returns and repairs and refunds and price inquiries and product inquiries and personalization. No. Narrow, laser focus down. I'd want to create an agent that will accurately return the price when someone inquires about an item. Get that bit right. Once you've got that bit, then build on top of that. If you try and create 10 things at once, you'll fail at all of them.
So you're saying decompose the problem.
Correct.
To the smallest steps and build it up. So isn't there, so people are going to start thinking, I would guess, well, hang on a minute, that means I may have thousands and thousands of agents. Is that something to worry about?
No, this is how you start the building process for an agent. The agent will be capable of doing many things, but if you attempt to do them all at once, you'll get bad results for all of them because you're unable to isolate your variables. In any scientific endeavor, you need to reduce the variables down so that you've just got one or two which you can fine tune to get the result you want. And what I see on most projects is they're too big. This is something that traditional programming has learned through painful lessons. Is you do not start with the finished product. You start with a very simple bit of that finished product. You get that working, and then you move on to the next and the next and the next.
Yeah. So it begs the question now, from building from that, what does great collaboration look like between an AI agent and a human?
Right. I see the biggest skill humans need to learn today, currently, is rabbit hole avoidance.
Explain.
So an AI can go down an erroneous path. And what I see a lot of people doing is then attempting to dig out of that hole and go back into the right path. It rarely works. Learn to realize the prompt that caused the hole to be dug Go back above that prompt, get rid of that prompt, and try again from a new angle, rephrase the question. If required, give the AI some guide rails to avoid going down that particular path. You may have to do this a few times. An AI will always if you give an AI an out, and it's an easy out, it will take it. Learn to spot when an AI is starting to go wrong and stop, back up a level and try again. Your progress will improve no end.
So vigilance, you're recommending vigilance as a core key takeaway from if you were to take away one thing from this entire episode, vigilance is one of the core things.
100%. It is the most common issue I see is people ask the AI a thing, the AI answers, and they just blindly accept the answer, copy, paste, done. And then they realize, once it's been posted, once it's been sent, that's too late. Start to check, just as you would with any new employee, check their work.
And I think this also comes with practice too. If you want to get better at skiing, the more mileage you have on the mountain, the better things will get. Obviously, there's technique and learning. I'm not saying there isn't, but the more mileage you get, the more chance you have to practice. It's the same thing with large language models like ChatGPT. The more you use it, the more you understand how to better use it and tune it to get what you want out of it.
Yeah, I think that the major thing that people don't fully get yet is the AI is an incredible role play device. If you set up the role play in the correct way, you are and then describe what the AI should be, make it into a game, and it will play that role.
That's a great. I use that technique in my own prompting on a regular basis. And the other thing, and I know this will change, in the relatively near future, is I start every prompt with these words: "Do not hallucinate." Period, and then give the prompt.
Right. I think I don't do that all the time, but if I'm in an environment where there is a risk that a hallucination is a bad thing, I want people to realize that hallucination has been corrupted as a word, I think, in this space. It doesn't mean made up all the time. Humans hallucinate inventions. It didn't exist before. Somebody has combined multiple ideas into a new thing and hallucinated a great new idea. That can be incredibly powerful in AI. That can literally give you new product ideas that it's hallucinated. So it's not always a negative, but it is something you need to avoid. Instructing the model that hallucination is not a desirable output automatically removes 95% of all hallucination, and context will fix most of the rest.
Absolutely. And I think if you want to tell it, I need to do market research on a particular area, okay, and I want to do deep research, fact-based research of things that don't add things to join the gaps, okay, then I think there's value in being able to say that. But your point is you don't want to stifle innovation that it could come up with.
Right. It's incredibly powerful. You can give it the one that made me smile, and this was maybe back in 2023, was what is halfway between a hat? What is the word that's halfway between a hat and a shoe? Now, at the time, hat and a shoe, what's the halfway word between a hat and a shoe? I asked the AI and it said belt. And then I thought, that kind of makes sense. Hats on the head, shoes on the feet, belts in the middle. That kind of makes sense. But it came up with that, and that was a hard problem. That was a difficult problem, which it came up with a really quite valuable solution to. Now, although that's quite generic and esoteric, you can ask those kinds of questions to AI. Hey, we've got this new product. Our competitors got this. what would be a good counter? What would be a good move by us? And let it hallucinate a good idea. Ultimately, you've got the decision to say, yes, I'll go with that or not. But take advantage of this intelligent hump breaker, as I call it. It gets you over the creative hump a lot.
So what are some of the, I want to switch the direction of the conversation a little bit. What are some of the more surprising or more importantly, inspiring applications that you're seeing on the forum that are out there today?
Yeah. So obviously Be My Eyes was the one that really inspired me. So this was a group of researchers who used the GPT-4o vision model to act as a real-time vocal instructor guide to the blind. So you would have your mobile phone out and it would look at the world and go, there's a taxi in front of you. And so you could say, hey, I want to grab a taxi. Can you let me know when there's a taxi so that I can hail it? And ChatGPT go, oh, I can see a taxi. If you lift your hand, and then it would say, oh, yes, the taxi is pulling over now. It's just in front of you. Yep, keep going forwards. That was incredible. That was absolutely astounding. That was a use I never thought would be possible ever. And it's just common practice now. It's like you could just download it to your phone. It's just no big deal anymore. And there are similar things for lots of disabilities where you've been able to enhance their enjoyment of something because the AI can endlessly and repetitively and never get bored updating the user on some minutia, something they need to know that's important to them. That is inspiring to me.
Wow, that's great.
Very cool. And so we hear terms, we've talked today about large language models or foundation models like ChatGPT. We've talked about fine tuning. And we've also, we haven't really touched on artificial general intelligence or AGI. What sort of areas that we haven't yet talked about do you think people should be paying more attention to in this space?
I think we are heading towards a moment which is going to be similar to when farming became mechanized. And that's causing a lot of tension. What will people do when X job can be done by AI? And I think the first question you answer is not am I going to be replaced? Is I need to learn how to use these tools in my job. Because any employer that sees you can make use of AI and create more value than in the past, I don't see why an employer would remove that person.
And to your point, I mean, the need for people to manufacture chariot wheels or to have that many blacksmiths, it's not an as commonly needed train.
No.
It's sort of at the moment in terms it's not that certainly that common as a job. Okay, steam train engineer, this sort of thing. But it doesn't mean that the need for those people and their expertise has gone away. It just needs to be applied differently.
Right. 100 years ago, if you were to say the most common job in the world, I believe at the minute it's still farming. I think most people would understand farming, but retail and fast food is like a really common job. If you'd have said that, oh yes, there'll be lots of people doing retail and fast food. No farmer in the 1800s would, what? No, that can't be a thing that would exist. There will be something that exists, which we all do, like that. We just don't know what it is yet. So there's a lot of fear mongering. There's a lot of concern, most of it unjustified because the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
So what is something you believe, Spencer? I'm talking about you personally here, but that you believe about AI that others would disagree with potentially. What do you think that is?
I don't think they'll ever be sentient. Not in the way we are, because our sentience is a product of our environmental requirements. We need to reproduce, we need to have heat, we need to have food. An AI that has none of those requirements will have a different requirement to exist. So consciousness may well be something that an AI experiences, but I don't think it will be like ours. But I most of the developer forum, the most popular posts are when people talk about, is the AI conscious? Is the AI self-aware? And it's an algorithm.
Okay. Let's try one last thing, really. How would you say that you know your perspective on how you balance the innovation that companies want to drive with the potential risks of misuse or unintended consequences? How do they get through that balance?
Yeah. At the minute, AI is so new and shiny that people are plugging it into places that it is better done with caution. And this has happened to a number of large companies. They've just gone, we need to get AI in here. And they plugged it in, and they've forgotten all of the rules that they normally apply to their other parts of their business. That needs to come back. We have these systems in place. It's what we're building. We are building, you can take advantage of intelligence that also respects the boundaries and regulations that everybody has to do in business. This is not a new thing. It's not a super scary thing. It's just something you need to do. It's a requirement. I don't think anybody enjoys having to comply with a set of rules, but you need to. It's been decided that's the best thing for the market that you're in. You need to comply with it. And for some reason, a lot of AI projects just seem to have forgotten that.
Yeah, I mean, things like privacy or data protection rules or GDPR, things like this, or the California, CPRA and Privacy Acts there. These are things that the companies have put in place over the past, 10 to 20 years and made sure that everything they do and it protects data.
Right.
Where you're handling personal data, you handle it in the right way and you allow people to have control and agency over their data. You find AI companies who are, or AI use cases in companies where people have completely forgotten that there are data protection rules, and they're just exposing the data and sharing it, and suddenly the lowest intern can see the CEO's emails because the idea of being able to restrict access to that wasn't something you wanted to do. You just wanted to agentify this thing as fast as you could.
And guess what? We're going to cover that in our next episode. Which is great. So, Spencer, I want to just summarize a couple of, so for our audience, some of the key takeaways that we've seen. So one is clearly vigilance. You cannot just launch it and fire it and think that it's going to work. You've really got to do that. The second thing is you as an employee are not going to be replaced by AI, but you are going to be replaced by somebody who is using AI.
Yep, absolutely.
Embrace.
That's right. And then the third part is how, and this comes back to the reason why we exist, is you've got to do things in a safe and responsible way while maintaining company intellectual property, customer privacy, employee safety, all of the things that we take for granted today in enterprise land has got to apply to the AI from the get-go. You cannot even prototype without it, in my opinion.
Completely agree. It's a new shiny toy. Now we have to put in all of the guardrails that all of the rest of the systems we use have to follow. And I don't think it's a particularly scary or difficult task to change the way that your AI is currently being implemented and go, okay, a few things. Do we really need AI? Yes, no. Yes, we do. Right. Let's make sure that this follows the same kinds of rules and procedures that we'd give any intelligence within our company, any person within our company. We would say, you have to comply to these rules and standards.
But executives have to make a choice to want to do that. And then they put the relevant controls in place and the governance to ensure that it happens. Okay. So it's got to be a lead from an executive to say, this is something we're going to lean into safe and responsible AI, and we want to do this properly. So I'm holding my team accountable to go and make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is awesome. So next week we're going to have episode number 3 of our podcast, and we are going to be having Peter Larson, who's one of your peers in the company. He's our Chief Technical Officer, and the 4 of us are going to be talking about some of the issues that we're talking about, agentic behavior, and we're going to talk about things like entitlements and various aspects. It's not boring stuff, I promise. This is super exciting stuff that really needs to come out into the open, that people are considering as you're taking your projects from an R&D experiment into something into production. So please tune in next week. And again, thank you, Spencer, for your time and being part of this. And Alistair, always a pleasure to be co-hosting with you. Thank you, everybody, for your time. That's a wrap on this week's episode of the Agentic Insider. Thank you for listening. For show notes and more, please visit agenticinsider.show. To learn more about Iridius, visit iridius.ai. We'll see you next time.